for the Tuesday, December 2nd, 2014 Abington School Building Committee meeting. First item on the agenda is the approval of the November 4th, 2014 School Building Committee meeting minutes. I ask if we have a motion
Make that motion.
and a
Second.
second. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. All right, the minutes of the November 4th, 2014 meeting are approved. Next item on the agenda, we're going to ask Mary to come up and give a MSBA update.
At this point, we have processed and executed the project scope and budget agreement, MSBA. As we reported at last meeting, DESE has also approved the schematic design documents for the project. MSBA, following the execution of the project scope and budget document, forwarded to the town. A project funding agreement is the last agreement that we need to execute for the project. Rick, your office was working on trying to get those documents together for them.
Right, they're prepared. The only thing that I expected it today actually, is the town council certification. So that should be out the door tomorrow. And I have communicated that to Nick.
Milano,
Thank you.
yes. So once that's returned, then we'll be having our kickoff meeting with MSBA, but they're aware that we're moving forward at this point with the project scope and budget agreement. And we have submitted our schedule for submissions to them, and they've accepted those. So following the the project funding agreement and the kickoff meeting, the next phase for us with MSBA is we'll be asking for assignment of our commissioning agent. And the commissioning agent is an agent that helps the owner with commissioning heating, plumbing, mechanical systems, electrical systems in the building after it's constructed. And that is a service that is provided by MSBA and paid for by MSBA. So we ultimately ask them to assign one of their approved agents, and then they work with us. They do review of the design documents and then do the commissioning once the building is constructed. So that's your MSBA update.
Eric, what do you mean by commissioning?
Well, they run through each of the systems to make sure that the systems are installed according to the plans and specs, and that they actually operate in accordance with the plans and specs. So they'll be checking lighting controls, HVAC controls, setbacks, various monitoring systems, because we have a building monitoring system that allows you to monitor all the mechanical equipment, well, HVAC equipment. And so they run through all of those pieces of equipment and make sure they're recording properly on the BMS system, and that all your sequences and set points are in accordance with the contract documents. So it really just puts the HVAC contractor and the mechanical and plumbing contractors through kind of a set of tests and inspections to make sure they're labeling equipment right and the equipment in the building runs correctly in accordance with the spec.
So make sure we get what we paid for.
Correct. And it operates the way it should operate. I mean, that's usually the biggest issue or item that they help an owner with, is that they will work with the contractor and with their maintenance staff to make sure that there is an understanding on how those systems operate, and that the recording mechanisms are all there so that you feel comfortable with the systems.
And how long does that extend beyond the opening of the buildings?
Months.
Really? So
Yes.
they can help us troubleshoot anything that comes up?
Well, it's not troubleshooting. Again, they will run through the systems and make sure that they're operating in accordance with the plans and specs. And we would hope that, and we would highly suggest that you have maintenance staff involved in that process, because ultimately when the various contractors and the commissioning agent are working on systems, that can allow the owner's reps to learn a little bit about the system that is beyond just being able to read plans. And you have an opportunity to talk to the serviceman too about, what are you doing and how do you tweak this or tweak that, and you can ask about maintenance routines and things like that, which can oftentimes be helpful to the staff beyond just being given a building and a couple hours training session. This follows up after the training sessions usually performed, so it's a good way to kind of bounce off ideas and get more information.
It's a good question, because it's something that the MSBA instigated a few years ago that had never been in place in the Commonwealth, and most of the schools, almost all the schools that were being opened without a commissioning agent involved prior to MSBA making this a requirement. And what they found is they looked back historically at these 250,000, 200,000 square foot buildings that were being turned over to owners without any kind of review of the systems, because the engineers and the architects are responsible for making sure that the system that is installed is what was specified. But there was really nobody in place to be there to run the systems through their cycles and make sure the equipment was actually operating exactly the way it was supposed to. And so the MSBA realized that there was real value in making sure that the owners and the facilities people, in your case Jason, will become best friends with the commissioning agent, because it's a real opportunity to learn more about the systems. And then they do have to come back after 10 months of occupancy in the building and re-review the operation of the systems and make sure everything is operating the way it was supposed to. So, and MSBA pays for 100% of that, by the way, of the commissioning agent, because they think it's such a good value.
It's a lead requirement as well, so part of the process of having a third-party commissioning agent is part of the lead
That's
documentation.
absolutely right.
And there's usually a coordination effort as well with the commissioning agent and the and you guys to get whatever tests they're going to do are also listed in the specification so that the correct measuring tools, I guess, are in place there.
And they do get involved in the design process. They will be, I think Mary mentioned, but they'll be reviewing our design documents and making recommendations and asking questions about those as well to make sure that they're just as confident in the systems that are being specified as we are and as our engineers are.
Mary, you used an acronym earlier, BMS.
Building Management System.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and
Computer.
the building management system goes a little bit beyond the other acronym you'll have a lot with that, HVAC is ATC, which is automatic temperature controls. This system brings it like a level higher. It'll tell you about how the motors are operating, your inputs and outputs on the various pieces of equipment. It'll give you meter readings if you can have sub-meter readings, so it allows you to really monitor the building and how it's operating above understanding just the control sequence for each of the pieces of equipment.
Great.
Jason will ultimately have software on several computers and will have remote access to a software package that allows anybody who has access to review at any point in time what's going on in the building in terms of all of the, just as Mary mentioned, all the motors on all of the equipment that's putting fresh air and ventilation and heat and cooling into the building, all the temperatures, the individual temperatures in every single room at any single point in time, and they can run cycling on those so that they can take a look at what the average temperature is in a particular space. If they have a staff member who's complaining about the temperature in a space, they can take a look and see if it just happens to be someone who's super sensitive or if there really is some kind of temperature differential that's occurring in the space. So the building management system really is an amazing tool for allowing the facilities people or anybody who's interested in monitoring exactly what's going on throughout the entire building.
Great.
Okay.
Very good, thank you. Next item on the agenda, I'd just like to call up Scott and/or Troy to provide a design update.
We're going to have Par do a lot of the talking for us tonight, which is going to seem highly unusual. There's nothing wrong with us. I did want to mention, because it's always very strange when we transition from the schematic design process that we have been in for over a year now to the phase that we're in now and moving forward in terms of completing a package that ultimately will be what this building gets constructed from. And because a lot of that happens behind the scenes. For example, up until now, at any given time, there might have been anywhere from 2 to 10 people working on this project, kind of full-time every single day for let's say for the last year or so. And even though you don't see it sitting in these meetings, what happens from a month ago, actually a month and a half ago, almost 2 months ago, forward until we go out to bid with this project is more like 50 plus people working almost full-time. Engineers, geotechnical, civil, structural, plumbing, mechanical, HVAC, a bunch of architects, a bunch of designers working all behind the scenes to produce a set of documents that will allow us to build the building. And you'll only see those in two kind of major steps. When we finish design development, which we're in now, and when we finish construction documents. But one of the things we brought with us tonight, if anybody just wants to take a peek after the meeting, is the set from Franklin High School, which is a similar sized project. And just to give you an idea, I mean, literally, there are 600 full-size drawings that require roughly 100 hours apiece to produce in this set, and then there's thousands of pages of specifications. So, and you kind of only see the finished product, and then you get the invoices for all the work that's going on, and it feels a little strange, but that's the real difference in what's going on now versus the last year or so. There really are it takes an enormous amount of people, a lot of time to produce documents, and we'll from time to time be bringing in the documents, and we'll be we'll be showing nice images about what the interior of the building is going to look like, and we'll be talking about the building floor plan in more detail. But those are very, very small pieces of an enormous set of documents and specifications that are now being generated. So if anybody wants to take a peek at those tonight and kind of realize what's going to be happening over the next several months, we're happy to hang around and walk anybody through that. There'll be various pieces like tonight. Par is here Carrie and Tim are here to talk about traffic and give the whole committee a little bit of a review of some of the highlights of the traffic study, and then talk about last night's public meeting to sort of talk with ZBA about the process and the schedule and the permitting schedule, et cetera. And they're going to talk a little bit about what happened then and bring the committee up to speed on those things as well. And our meetings from this point forward will be just trying to highlight the things that that we think you'll be interested in and that are publicly kind of important for you to be informed of. But there's also an enormous amount of work going on behind the scenes that we're happy to present and talk about at any point in time, but it's not nearly as interesting as nice images of what the building is going to look like. So most of our presentations will be focused on that. In fact, it won't be too long before we'll be showing you, just like we do with the exterior, some of the images of the interior spaces, the dining spaces, auditorium spaces, classroom spaces, corridors, in a visual format that allows it to look real, and so that you can understand and start to critique and give us feedback on those things as well. So, but we just want to say that's kind of we sometimes shift into this phase, and it's like a mystery wrapped inside an enigma, and nobody really knows what's going on behind the scenes. But that's what's going on, and we'll continue to try to highlight important things. With that, Carrie, I'm going to ask you guys to either talk last night's meeting or traffic in whatever order you like.
Sure. So I think I'll just give you an update on kind of the informational meetings associated with the local permitting boards. So last night we went to the planning board and had an informational meeting with them, kind of gave a brief overview of the site and kind of discussed the deadlines and timeframes of when we're going to be submitting to them. So what we presented to them was that we'll be submitting to them as well as the other boards around April of 2015, which coincides with the 60% construction document, which at that point we'll have enough of the design done to be able to address any of their submission requirements. They had some general questions, gave us some good feedback as to what they would like to see when we come back. Some of the items were just drainage, where the outfall was over by Berry Road, and they're concerned for mitigation in that. Some of the fields, just talking about playable space and specifically what's going to happen in the interim when the construction is occurring and where those youth groups going to go. A small discussion about solar panels and the potential for that on the site. and then just some general conversation about grading, retaining walls, and some questions about the wetlands. So those were kind of the main points, which were good to hear. Next Monday, we're going to go to the Conservation Commission and do the same thing with them, kind of have an informational meeting highlighting the wetland resource areas and how we plan to address those in the design. And then next Thursday, we're going to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and kind of perform the same exercise with them and just give them a chance to comment on any initial things they might have to talk about. So that's kind of local boards. Based on the recommendations in the traffic study that Tim will discuss, we are proposing some potential improvements on Route 18, which would require us to go to the Mass DOT. Their time frame for review is a little bit longer than the local boards, probably about 5 to 6 months. So we're going to probably be targeting to submit something to them in February to kind of coincide with the design. We'll set up a pre-application meeting as soon as possible here to get them on board with all the potential improvements. So if there's no questions about that, I'll just kind of move in. I know we said we're going to talk about the emergency access potentials. And I'll just go to this plan here. Kind of has an overall image of the area. So it was brought to our attention that the police department would like a secondary emergency access to the property. So currently, right now, it's just that one way in, one way out. Their concern is that if something was to occur on that road, it was blocked, or somehow impassable, that they would have no other way to get to the school and the town hall and the library. So what we did was we took a look at 4 potential options coming from each direction, and I'll kind of briefly go over the constraints that we're seeing as we preliminarily take a look. So what you're looking at here in red is obviously the school property. The blue shown on the map is GIS wetland data. So certainly nothing field verified, but what's available for this conceptual analysis. So I'll just briefly go through. So one of the areas is through the condo complex coming in from the east. Some of these constraints are obviously it's private property. Permission would be required to make modifications on their property. Right now, there's, we would be looking at in this area here, providing some sort of vehicular access. It would be within the wetland buffer, so it would require Conservation Commission approval. And we're looking at probably about an 8-foot change in grade between this off-site area and the proposed site plan. So it would have to kind of require a little bit of a ramping down to that access. But the main factor is that it is on private property.
8-foot change which way? It goes
It will go down.
on our property?
No, it will go down off the property. Yep.
And
So we're building that site up.
just to add to that, because I know that we've all, far as we've been talking about this issue for a long time, and Troy and I at one point in time went out and walked the property with them, and it's not just initially we had thought, oh yeah, we'll just cut through. We'll just build a road through, but it really is probably some of the nicest trees on that property happen to be right in the pathway that you would want to cut to provide access from that development to our property. So, and the changing grade is difficult too. So if that were to ever be a proposed access point, there would be honestly a significant amount of site work that occurred on their property in order to make that happen. And I know that some suggestions have been floated out there to people that sort of have knowledge of either people who are there or the attitude there. And certainly there's always this resistance to, if we make a fantastic access road in that direction, it will cause students to kind of shortcut through there on their way in and out. So it doesn't, it really doesn't feel like a real viable option in terms of an emergency access point. I'm not trying to put words in anybody's mouth. A lot of people have had discussions surrounding this, but that is the general vibe that we've gotten as we've talked to everybody.
Yep. So the other option that we looked at coming in from the south of the school here, the immediate point would be this Lowe's parking lot here. There's a property line that runs right along here. This is the town property. However, this area here is obviously the Lowe's property. Again, we have wetlands running along the edge. These are GIS, so they're probably a little bit not conservative. So there could be potentially wetlands right up to the property line in that area, which would obviously require alterations or crossings potentially. Again, we've got the private property issue where you've got to get Lowe's buy-in on that. As Scott mentioned, again, tree clearing here and some efforts associated with that. It's about 600 feet of distance in that option. The third option would be coming in from this residential cul-de-sac here. We understand there was a sewer connection put in cross-country right through here to service the town hall. This is about a quarter of a mile. Would require tree clearing. The good news is there is the sewer already there. Even the town GIS kind of shows breaks in the wetlands, but that would likely require some alteration or crossing to get that permitted as well. Tree clearing, stabilization of that ground would be incorporated into that.
And that's private property as well, correct?
This property right here is, the assessor says it's town owned.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't confirmed with anybody, but that's what
Most
the
of it's
data.
about.
Yeah. So then the fourth option we looked at was coming off from Berry Road. Again, private property. This last lot here is privately owned. You've got wetlands here. The GIS kind of shows a break in that, but based on field observations, that wetland doesn't have a break in it and continues right around the property. So that would definitely require a crossing of the wetlands. You've got trees, and then the other constraint with that is if you look at the proposed site plan in that same area, it would be lining up with the fields. So some of you are familiar with the site plan. We've got about an 8 to 10 foot wall in that area, right up against the wetland resource area. So it would be a little bit tricky, and we'd have to kind of work with somehow getting the access onto this property and working with the fields. But again, private property would need to be crossed in that option as well. So those are kind of the four main options that we looked at to try to develop some thoughts and constraints for you guys to evaluate.
Did you talk to the fire chief yet regarding those? And I guess my broader point is, do any of those options have other or broader public safety implications that might be worth considering? I know this is just a school project per se, but I know there's been some talk about trying to have some other access to, say, the western part of Abington. So I'm just throwing that at the wall. I hope it's starting something, but I'm just curious if that conversation had been had yet.
I don't think we've gone back to them and explained all the constraints. One of the challenges, I think we mentioned this to the building committee last time. One of the challenges you have as a committee is and this being an MSBA project, is we don't have the ability to spend any time or resources looking at anything kind of off the property line. And certainly it can't be part of the proposed project because the MSBA would say, it's a more of a town issue. And so I think it would be valuable for us to go back to police and fire and explain to them some of the challenges and restrictions and that it was looked at. I'm certain that this was probably an issue even when the town hall was built and put in that location. I mean, you have one huge advantage in that you've got a very large two-way boulevard coming into this site. We're not talking about just purely having an access road into the site, but we certainly could go back to them and review with them the areas we looked at. It will be important for everybody to understand, though, that kind of the building committee is somewhat limited in how broad they can make their scope be.
Can I mention, I was on the town hall building committee, and it did come up during the construction of town hall and library. And the sewer connection The sewer department at that time had actually offered to pave that connection so that the kids in the neighborhoods in Western Abington, the western part of Abington, could actually use it as a path to get to school, get to the library. The neighbors at that time asked them not to pave it. They thought there would be more negatives than positives. I don't know what their sentiment would be now if the town were to kind of revisit that. Again, at that point, they were talking more of a bike trail, 4 or 6 foot wide path. We're talking more of a fire access road, which would be a little wider. Might not have to be paved, maybe it is paved. And it would be just, and I want everyone who's watching this, we're talking about an emergency access road, not a road, no matter where it can go, if it can go anywhere. But it is, as you've mentioned, 1,500 feet or 1,000 feet.
Yeah, it's roughly a quarter mile.
So it's something that, it's not in the school budget to do that, but it might be something for the future that if the town wants to consider looking at it for long-term planning. That might be a way to go. During the town hall library planning, we looked at all the same options, and wetlands was restricting us everywhere. But our saving grace, as you just mentioned, was that there is a divided boulevard that if, basically if there's an accident on one boulevard, on one side of the boulevard, the other one is typically would be open, and there's still actually room to have two-way traffic on one side of the boulevard because they're both wide drives. Your worst case scenario is that both the inbound and outbound lane are both blocked at the same time. No one ever hopes that happens, and it hasn't happened yet since it's been there, but that's why we're looking at, is there something more we can do? I don't know that we can.
Any sense of what minimum, what's the basic, I guess what's the minimal second, fire access would be? Is it just a street cleared path or tree cleared path, or is it gravel or what?
Yeah, that would certainly have to be discussed with the fire department as to what they would want, but it's typically 18 to 20 feet wide is what typically fire departments require. Some do require it to be paved, others are okay with some sort of stabilized surface, but we haven't really discussed the specifics yet with the fire department.
They have indicated though in the earlier meetings that it would be an access that they would want to bring their trucks onto, so that does mean that you need to have a certain amount of grade improvements and structural bearing capacity in those locations.
You basically be building a road in order to support the weight of a fire truck. And that can be expensive, whether it's 300 feet or 1,000 feet. But I appreciate you doing the due diligence to look at whatever options we can offer to them and explain why some really aren't pragmatic.
Sure.
I want to just ask people to consider if they feel that this group has a responsibility, because this has been an ongoing situation, and it's going to be another ongoing situation as we add more people to this site. And because the police and fire made it infinitely clear to us that no, you have a responsibility to do this. That we don't have some sort of correspondence requesting consideration of these things so that they can be weighed, and with an explanation that we can't go any farther as a group because we're limited by the scope of the work that's been approved by MSBA. And we make sure we copy the chiefs on those correspondences so that they know we're asking those questions and making that effort. Because we've kind of talked, we've flushed all that out here, that this is a broader issue. It's not an easy one to solve, and it's really beyond the scope of what we can do as a group.
And just so the professionals are aware, well, in the meetings I was at earlier with the police chief and the fire chief, they were very cooperative. I think they understand the big picture and the restrictions that are out there, because as I said, we went through this analysis with the town hall library, which is in the same center of town, geographic center of town. There's also a certain segment of people in town who do not want an east-west connector. Years in the 1940s, 50s, that was designed for that road to go, let its way to go all the way out to Hancock Street. And in fact, I think it was the 1970s, a landowner in Western Abington offered to build the road and connect it through, and the town said, no thanks, we don't want it. That got revisited again when the sewer line went through, because now they were clearing trees, and how much do you want to do here? And they said, no, just the sewer line. Because it's so long, and now wetlands restrictions are so much more stringent than they were 30 years ago. Back then, it might have been easier to put a road through than now. It might be almost impossible, or very expensive, much more expensive to do. The one good thing that I think the fire chief had commented is the new building is going to be a much safer building than some of the existing buildings. So we still have the same high school population. We're adding the middle school population, but now there are a lot of safety enhancements in the new building, and there's certainly a benefit to getting the middle school kids off of Washington Street and that whole drop-off area, and having school traffic off, essentially on a dead-end street where it's a lot more calm and safe for everyone. So those were some of the benefits that we saw when we were looking at safety issues up in that area.
We've been saying, even without the emergency egress, this is a safe, this is likely a more statistically safe building than what we currently have with the existing condition, with kids really pouring out on Washington Street at dismissal at the Frollo. With any given day, it's a dangerous thoroughfare. Regardless of that, we're gonna cut the ribbon, open the door, and rightfully so. The community's gonna say, well, why didn't you find a secondary emergency egress to this? So I just want to make sure that we've got it well documented. Not that we went as far as we could, and you never know. Maybe as a result of that, something will emerge.
If it's helpful, we can certainly prepare, along with PAR, a summary of just what Carrie talked about tonight, and we could prepare that in the form of a memo to the committee and indicate that the connection in the southwest might render further review by the town, but also explain the restrictions that the building committee are under. And if you decide, after taking a look at that as a memo, that it makes sense to copy that to some of the other officials in town, we could certainly do that.
I think
there'd be benefit to that idea.
All right, if there's no more discussion on that, I'll turn it over to Tim Thompson, who's the traffic engineer from PAR, and he'll kind of review the traffic study, what we looked at when we were doing the traffic study, and then our recommendations that we're proposing. So this is just up and down.
Hi everyone, as Carrie said, my name is Tim Thompson. I'm a traffic engineer with PAR Corporation. I'm just going to give you an overview on the traffic study that we prepared for the project. Just to start off, I'll share with you the project area and the limits and the intersections that we looked at as part of the study. The first intersection we looked at was the intersection of Route 18, Glenwitz Way, and Lincoln Boulevard. We also looked at the intersection of Route 18 and Shaw Avenue, and then the intersection of Lincoln Boulevard and Washington Street. So at each intersection, we performed traffic counts. During the AM period, we looked at the hours between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. to catch both that, the commuter traffic as well as the traffic associated with the arrival times of the school. And then in the afternoon period, we looked at the hours between 1:30 to 6 o'clock, again to capture both the PM commuter time between 4 and 5, and then the dismissal time associated with the two schools. We also looked at the crash history at each of the intersections. We gathered crash information from both the Mass DOT database and also from the Abington Police Department. With that crash data information, we developed crash rates at each of the intersections, which we were able to compare against both statewide and Mass DOT District 5 crash rates. All of the intersections had crash rates at or below the state or district averages, indicating that none of the three intersections had significant safety concerns above what you would expect at a normal, either signalized or unsignalized intersection. After that, we performed capacity analyses at each of the intersections. We looked at three different conditions. We looked at existing conditions, a future no-build condition, and a future build condition. Now, a capacity analysis takes a look at how the intersection operates, and based on the amount of delay at the intersection per vehicle, the intersection is assigned a level of service, which ranges from A to F. A being an intersection that experiences very little delay, and F being an intersection that experiences high delay. For our future no-build scenario, we included a growth factor of 1% on all the existing traffic data that we collected. That's consistent with both traffic patterns throughout the area and population growth within the area. And then we also included background growth for potential development at this parcel on the northwest corner of Route 18 and Glenwitz Way. For our analysis, based on communication we had had with the planning department at the time of the analysis, we had expected a Tedeschi Dunkin' Donuts to go into that parcel. Based on further communication with the planning department, it seems like that parcel, nothing has been finalized as far as what might go in there. There is potential for it to be developed, but for the cases of our study, we did include the Tedeschi Dunkin' Donuts, and actually there was also 18 condominiums at that location as well. So all the traffic that was generated from that development went into our future no-build alternative. And then for our future build alternative, we looked at all the traffic that was generated with the existing high school there. We took a look, we calculated what we thought would be the projected volumes from what's at the Frollio Middle School. We removed those trips from the Frollio Middle School and redistributed them coming from the new site. So there was some removal of trips, but they were added back in and then just redistributed from the opposite side of Route 18. So based on that, our capacity analysis showed really two areas that were operating at above capacity. We had the northbound approach under the future build condition. The northbound approach, with the increase in traffic going to the school, we had a level of service F, specifically for the northbound left into the school, and then also for traffic heading eastbound from Glenwitz Way, exiting the school. We found a level of service F at both the AM peak hour and the PM school peak hour. So we're not expecting the school to have any significant impact to the adjacent intersections during the PM peak hour, just because the school isn't expected to have much traffic generated to and from it during that time period. With that, we developed a couple of recommendations for the intersection of Glenwitz Way and Route 18. First of all, the recommendation we had was to stagger the start and dismissal times at the middle school and high school as much as possible. I know that there was some conversation about doing that. So the more separation you can get between when all those high schoolers are leaving at the same time and when that second round of middle school students has to leave, the better that signalized intersection is going to operate. So having that staggered arrival and dismissal times is really is key for that. And then also, because we have heavy turn movements with the northbound left and heading from Glenwitz Way onto Route 18 with that left, we're proposing to introduce what's called a protected permissive left turn phase at those intersections. So it wouldn't be adding any lanes at those intersections, but it would be changing the signal heads at those intersections to provide some advanced protection for a vehicle making a left turn. Because those are the movements that we're seeing the most problems at, that would be a solution that we saw that would improve the overall level of service at the intersection from F to E, which would make it operate under an acceptable condition. And then the third recommendation we had, go here. If you look at how the striping is at this intersection right now, under existing conditions for the approach coming from Glenwitz Way, you'll see the striping it divides the approach into two lanes at the intersection. There's no lane striping that extends back, but also there's no what's called lane designation striping, so there's no There's no either striping that shows that this left lane should be for a left turn. There's also no signage to show that that should be a left turn, although it operates like that. So adding those striping and signage improvements are definitely something that we're recommending. Similarly, for the approach from Lincoln Boulevard at that intersection as well, having that lane designation striping and signing, we see it as a safety benefit, and also it'll help reduce some confusion as you approach the intersection. A lot of times people will approach and make 2 lanes. Sometimes they'll be in the middle of the lane and take up 2 lanes. So providing those extra features at the intersection would definitely have a show benefit. Any modifications that are made, I think as Carrie pointed out, any modifications that are made at the signal would require a permit with Mass DOT. That's approximately a 4 to 6 month process that we'd be looking at. As Carrie said, we would first want to initiate it with a meeting describing our study, describing our results, describing the benefits that we see from making these modifications to the signal, and then we would move forward with the permit process from there. So that kind of summarizes the traffic study and the recommendations that came from it. I'll take any questions. Sure.
So just so I'm clear, what you're proposing is that when you're heading northbound on Route 18 and you're at a red light right now,
Yes.
what we'd like to do, if Mass DOT would allow us, we would have a green arrow
Yes.
and a green light come on, and the southbound traffic would remain at a red light.
Correct.
So we would allow the northbound traffic to start on its own. They could go left, protected,
Yep.
and you could go northbound, keep going for a certain amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever, and then the arrow would go off,
Right.
and then the southbound traffic would go green and it would allow it to flow both ways.
Northbound and southbound would go simultaneously
Which
after
we
that.
see in
Correct.
some other areas.
Exactly.
But that's only if Mass Highway will allow it to happen. Or that we can ask them.
Correct.
What's the cost of that, changing the light? Is it substantial? Is it?
Here, for the northbound approach, there is a mast arm on this corner that extends out over the roadway. And there are 2 signal heads on it. They both have the 3 ball signal heads. So this would require replacing the signal head farthest to the left with what's called a doghouse style signal head that has both the arrow, the green arrow and the yellow arrow, adjacent to your 3 circular balls. If we were to install that, we would have to review the foundation and structural integrity of that mast arm. What we would do is review what's called review shop drawings that were submitted by the contractor that designed and installed that mast arm. We would have to verify that that new signal head could be supported by the existing mast arm. So if it could be supported by the existing mast arm, you don't have to replace the mast arm. You'd be able to save some money there. But if you do have to replace the mast arm, it would be a little bit more.
And I think the state doesn't pay for this, right? It would come out of our budget, and would MSBA not contribute?
No.
Okay.
MSBA would not contribute, no.
So we would pay for the improvements if the state would allow us to do it. Okay.
Based on your prior experience, what's the likelihood that the state would allow us to make those improvements?
I think as long as you're able to build a case for it and show that it's not going to cause a safety concern, there's going to be improved operations at the intersection. It's something that they'll consider.
It's also likely they might say, yes, let's do the striping, but not do the signal.
That's true too.
There might be some
That's true,
combination
too.
of what they want.
Or they could ask us to look at something maybe a little bit differently that might also,
Yeah.
that could potentially also help. But I think the first step is meeting with them, going through, showing what we've done, and explaining what we want to do with them.
And the striping changes on Lincoln Boulevard and on Glenowitz Way,
Mhm.
we can make on our own, correct?
Yeah, the town could.
Because that's town property.
Because it's town property.
Hey,
It would actually benefit things now. I mean, I'm driving my daughter to high school, in the mornings, and it would, I'd love to have a left turn.
Yeah,
signal.
we get the
I go
occasional
other way.
calls now, I'm sure you get them all the time too, people looking,
Yeah.
geez, why can't we just do that? Well, it doesn't quite work that way, so.
Is the reprogramming, is that integral to the fixture head, or is that?
It would have to be, the signal would have to be rephased and retimed to accommodate that change. But we haven't been out there in the cabinet, so we're not exactly sure what controller's out there. It's something we'd be able to find when we discuss it with Mass DOT. But most modern controllers, you can add that in, no problem.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Mass Highway is kind of stingy about changes on Route 18 because they don't want to slow down traffic flow. So I know, like, for a number of years, Abington's asked for a blinking light at Shar Avenue, and they've refused it every time it's been requested, is my understanding. But I think we have a pretty good case here, where it being a school intersection, that this is a pretty good safety improvement with, I would think, very little delay, especially, we're not really delaying the northbound commuter traffic in the morning. There's not as much southbound commuter traffic in the morning, so I would think and hope they would support it, and hopefully they will. But just caution, people know that Mass Highway doesn't always, they're not gonna look at just that intersection, they're gonna see how it might affect the other intersections before and after.
Just, and maybe I missed it, but when you were talking about with the staggering of the time, how much does that affect? You mentioned that right now, with without the staggering, it would be an F.
Mm-hmm.
With staggering, how does that improve the performance of that intersection?
So the way the analysis works is within the peak hour that we look at, we really target the worst 15-minute period. So for a situation like this where we have a school releasing and almost, 60% of the volume that's heading to that intersection from one approach is coming within 15 minutes. As far as analysis goes, it shows a poorly performing intersection. So if you can spread that out as best as you can, you have vehicles entering over a longer period of time. It puts less strain on the signal, and you get a better overall performance.
Right, but do you have an anticipated grade of that performance with staggering versus an F? Does that make it a B or a C or?
Not quite that. I mean, it depends on the intersection. It depends on the numbers. It's tough to say.
All right, well, I guess my point is that simply staggering the traffic isn't going to, in a sense, that's not going to hurt the case to DOT, to Mass DOT.
No.
Because
No.
if you guys, it would be, you could look at it when you're really not changing a heck of a lot if you're staggering the time from the current traffic pattern right now. So, just curious how that affects the appeal to DOT, who I don't think is going to be an enemy here, but still.
Yeah, it's tough for me to say how DOT will react to it, but I couldn't see why they would think that.
Can we mention, though, for the people who might be viewing this later, or because we're taping it,
Sure.
this is now ranked at an E or an F intersection, which is the same for most of the intersections on Route 18 through Abington up through Weymouth. I mean, unfortunately, Route 18 is a state highway with over 20,000 cars a day. Most of the intersections are all operating at E or F, so that's not out of the ordinary. But little incremental things we can do, like you described, can make it safer, but yet continue to flow. You don't see an A and B intersection unless you're in a cul-de-sac and a country road.
Correct.
With, 4 houses on the street. Right?
Correct.
I mean, they don't
Correct.
really exist when you're looking at traffic studies like this.
Right.
Good point. Very good point.
At the staggered release time, could we ban northbound traffic, right turn or straight across at the intersection?
I'm sorry, what was it?
At the two release times,
Yes.
when you come down Glenowitz Way, restrict a left turn on 18. They either go straight across Lincoln Boulevard or they take a right on 18, only during that release time.
It's
You can do it
It's
with
a
a
little
flashing light, no left turn when it's flashing,
Force them to Washington Street?
forcing down to Washington Street.
We've done things like that before. But ultimately, unless you have somebody there to enforce it, it just becomes really challenging to make people, agree to it. It's much better to have a solution from the very beginning that you know works with the signaling in the lanes.
And then you also don't want to create a problem elsewhere too. That could potentially, that's going to increase volumes at the Washington Lincoln intersection.
You're alleviating
Right.
you're alleviating traffic on Washington Street.
By moving to this
By
location.
closing Folio.
Right, exactly.
And just one other point, just to clarify, your initial analysis that showed it being an F assumed that all of the students left at the same time. And one of your suggestions is to stagger it, which is something that we've always had in our plan. We'll be staggering traffic. The high school kids will leave at one time a day, and then 30 minutes later, the middle school kids who don't drive, it'll be parents and buses, will leave at a different time of day. So that in itself will help spread the traffic.
That's right.
What would be your recommendation for staggering? Is it 15-minute, 45-minute?
I would say probably maybe half an hour. Just based on my observation of the existing conditions at the high school and how long it takes for that to kind of calm down before you'd have the middle school operations.
Won't that be dictated by the bus routes?
Yeah, there'll be a lot of, schedules for staff and students and bus routes, and will have an impact on the distance between the bells.
Right.
Can I just ask you a question about, sorry, go ahead.
Do you know what kind of material the existing mast arm poles are? Are they aluminum or steel?
I believe they're steel.
Okay. If they are steel and they're able to be kept in place, I know the MassDOT requires them all to be painted black now, so there will be some work involved with them. And the other thing that we've seen on a lot of the new jobs is if there is retiming or modifications of the intersection, MassDOT has new traffic software in the cabinets, and a lot of times we've been seeing complete replacement of cabinets because it's all new software now that can hook up to the laptops and so forth. So even though there's some reuse of the equipment or possibly some small replacement of others, there most likely will be some additional work even with the reuse.
Yeah, that's certainly something we would have to discuss with them when it came to that. Just based on my observations out there, it looks like the signal equipment is fairly new, not something that has been out in the field for 30, 40 years. Maybe 15, 20 at the tops.
When you started the discussion, you had said that you added the middle school traffic to the scenario, obviously.
Yeah.
Which is currently our grades 7 and 8. And I'm sure you did this, I just want to double check. You added the 5, 6 and the pre-K?
In the pre-K, yep.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So when we added the 5, 6 and pre-K, we just assumed the same distribution that enters and exits the high school now. So yes, we did add those numbers too.
Do you know if the intersections are interconnected?
Based on the signal plan that we got from Mass DOT to do the analysis, this intersection is not interconnected. I know there's the signal with Lowe's not too far to the south, but based on the plans that we have, it doesn't show the signal being interconnected.
Do you think they may require that?
It depends. It depends on the distance from that intersection, and seeing that it's not now, I'm not sure how old that Lowe's intersection is, but
Not much. It's not, historically speaking, it's not old.
I was going to say 5, 6 years.
since that Lowe's went in.
Yeah, about 5, 6 years, I'd say.
So yeah, if it's that recently that it's gone in, they probably would have required it in their project.
Anything else?
And I think one of the other things we were talking about in the general site plan for traffic safety was also to eliminate some of the breaks in the island in Glenwood's Way, so that traffic would be going, if you're exiting the school, you would, everyone would take a right and go around the Flagpole Rotary and then come down and approach the intersection lights, so that there was never people kind of trying to jump into the line of traffic as you can do today. So that also will help, you know, eliminate or avoid a lot of conflicts.
That is correct. Right, thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
That is it for our design update. So, yeah,
Great.
we're good.
Mary, if you want to give a brief budget update.
So included on the last page of your agenda is an updated budget. We have no additional commitments presented for tonight. A reminder that at our last meeting, the amendments for design services and owner's project management services were approved or included in the budget. And this month, there were 2 invoices submitted, one by AI3 for their work during the last 5 weeks on design development phase, and KBA for its work on OPM for design development phase. As you can see, we're tracking at a good percentage for our due date on completion of design development in January of 2015.
Mary, what's the update for the geotechnical work, the additional geotechnical work behind the high school?
That is included in the budget under the line item that's geotechnical, geoenvironmental, with a commitment of $78,000. And that work was, there was a meeting today, a pre-meeting today, to review the multiple pouring and test pit locations. We have quite a few planned on site. Worked with Jason out in the fields to make sure that we were going to minimize impact to future playing areas, and also with any considerations for the needs of the school for parking lot areas, etc. And we have included some additional locations at the suggestion of Mike Lyons based on trying to confirm conditions for not only the field areas and the building area. The building area is our main focus right now, but also for future parking lot facilities as well. And that's going to happen over the next 2 weeks, beginning next week.
So if people see equipment digging holes out behind the high school in December of 2014, it is not the start of the project.
It is not the start of the project. It's just investigation, and we have worked with both Jason with the school department and with PAR, our site designer, to make sure that the field conditions will be completely cleaned up at the end of our investigations.
Very good. Thank you, Mary. Do we have any additional business or items not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance?
Just to let you know, the website's going to be updated in the next month or so. The town is updating the entire town website. So we've been holding off on updating the school building committee website until the town updates the baseline.
Great. All right, if there's no additional information, schedule of future meetings. We have working sessions scheduled for Friday, December 5th, Friday, December 12th, and Friday, December 19th. All of those will take place at 7:30 a.m. at the North School. Our next full committee meeting is scheduled for January 8th, 2015 at 6 p.m. and that meeting is going to take place at the high school in the Paul K. Smith room.
Correct.
As Carrie had referenced earlier, they will be meeting with the Conservation Committee on December 8th at 7 p.m. at the Town Hall, as well as with the Zoning Board on December 11th, also at 7 p.m. at the Town Hall. And both of those, much like the Planning Board meeting that took place last night, are very brief timeline updates, as well as an opportunity for them to ask any preliminary questions they may have or provide any input as we start to move forward. Is there any additional business to come before the committee? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
That motion? Richard, could we establish the February date, just so we have an outlook to the February building committee date?
Sure, absolutely. It was requested by Mary that we look to establish the February meeting date.
And what would work better for us, the design schedule is February 10th?
Okay, the proposed date would be February 10th, sticking with a 6 PM time frame.
It's a long weekend, is it? 7, 8, 9? The one after it? Yeah, you're right.
Is there any school conflicts that we're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of at this time.
Would you say Tuesday?
Tuesday,
Probably
February.
Basketball game.
It's at 3:45 that day.
What's that?
It's at 3:45 that day.
You're on top of things.
Beautiful.
It's 6 PM.
We can celebrate our victory then. So, it sounds like February 10th, 2015, that's a Tuesday evening at 6 PM. We'll tentatively plan on the police station. We'll confirm availability. If for some reason this location's not available, we would use the Paul K. Smith room at the high school. Okay. We had a motion from Kathy. Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Very good. Have a good evening. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.